Welcome viewers to the Thought Leaders Show. I'm your host, Major Sunil Shetty. The Indian startup ecosystem is thriving due to entrepreneurial spirit among young Indians, especially the millennials. There is also support from government and startup enablers who are playing a key role. In this episode, we have thought leader Eric Aslan, who is the Executive Director of Nexus Incubator based in New Delhi. Nexus is a collaboration between the US Embassy, New Delhi and ACIR to showcase the best of American and Indian entrepreneurship, innovation and technology, and also commercialization. To understand what this means, I have with me Eric. Welcome to the show, Eric.
Thank you. Very glad to be here, Major.
Let's understand what Nexus Incubator is all about. Why I ask this is there are many incubators across India. They are private, they are government incubators. How is Nexus different to other incubation? I know it is supported by the US government, but I want to hear from you as to what Nexus is all about and how is it different?
No, absolutely. That's a question that from day one, what we were asked is that, why is there a need for another incubator here in India? When we started this 4 years ago in 2017, there was a report by Niti Aayog talking about the ecosystem in India. And the government itself of India said, part of the ecosystem, incubators play an important role in any ecosystem for entrepreneurship. And in India, that ecosystem is growing quite fast, but the incubation part of that program is still lacking. There were plenty of incubators, even back then in India, but the United States government looked and said, what we see as an American incubator, what we consider the services supporting the startup, we see it a bit different. And the incubators we see in India back at that time were not what we would call incubators. So they asked us, and we're an American nonprofit, to come in and create a incubator here in India to help Indian startups that would be more of what an American would consider an incubator. And that's a much more of a hands-on experience. Most of the incubators that we had seen at that time back in India were great spaces. They got lots of money from the government, physical spaces that were very nice. Maybe they would have a mentor come in once a month or have a talk every couple of weeks. So we would really consider that more of kind of a co-working space. And there's nothing wrong with co-working spaces. They've been very valuable as well. And in a growing ecosystem, there's room for all of us. But from an incubation point of view of helping Indian startups or helping startups anywhere grow and be successful and bring their product to market, we felt that there was a different model. So the US government decided to work with us to create the Nexus Incubator. So we did 4 years ago. And the core aspect of what we do at Nexus is have a 9-week intensive program to help Indian startups. We're sector agnostic. So helping innovative startups be successful and grow in India. Since that first cohort in 2017, we've now done 13 more. So we've graduated 14 cohorts over 153 companies. So we definitely think that we've actually hit the right spot here and that we're fulfilling a need that really wasn't being met earlier with the incubators. Now, incubators have expanded. There's a lot more incubators now in India, and those incubators are better. There is absolutely no question about that. 4 years ago, and where we are now, that Indian ecosystem for entrepreneurship has improved. But one of my favorite sayings is we've come a long way, but we still have a long way to go. So there's still massive room for improvement. And we are working with our startups and our incubation partners around the country to try to help and improve everybody's support system for startups in the ecosystem. And we think it's done very, very well. So happy to talk a bit more about that in the Nexus program. But I think, why the idea of having Nexus come into the first place was just that we felt there was a gap between what was being said, and there was a lot of incubators out there, and the actual on-the-ground support for startups, and that was a bit different than what we saw for American incubators.
I must say, that's commendable that 13 cohorts and 150 plus startups graduating from your incubation center, and that was starting at in 2014, where the Indian ecosystem was just kind of hearing about startups. So talking about startup incubator was completely another thing.
Yes.
So, one of the things with incubators I've seen is, it's, as you rightly said, great space, more like a co-work space. mentors coming in, talking about and going out. What's the, when it comes to Nexus Incubator, what is the vision, the larger vision, the bigger goal for, having these startups, supporting these startups in India?
So there's two kind of roles that the incubator kind of, our vision is. One is actually helping the startups themselves, right? So bringing those startups and giving them the practical support and networking and skill sets they need to be able to grow. So for each cohort, we'll have about 14 to 15 startups. And of course, we want to actually help those startups. The idea is kind of show the best practices of how that works, but not just with the lectures, but actually by doing it. But the larger idea and why the US government was involved in this was really to help the entrepreneurial ecosystem in India in general. The idea that India, I think, is like number 3 in the ecosystem for entrepreneurs around and startups around the world. The United States is the number 1. Entrepreneurship, I think, is in both in India's and the United States' blood. It's in our history, it's in our culture, it's in our identity. So that's something that really binds us together. And so this program, this Nexus program, was actually the first in the kind in the world for the US State Department. They've done this nowhere else in no other country. They specifically chose India because of the growth of startups, because of the shared vision and cultural history we have of entrepreneurship. So that was the idea, was to try to help that. So yes, by helping those individual startups, absolutely. But the idea here is not to compete and have another incubator that's going to compete with different other incubators. The idea is really to help the Indian ecosystem and work with different partners. One of the biggest reasons why they brought it in, specifically into New Delhi, was that they said, look, India is growing so fast. The startup ecosystem is growing so fast. All the individual elements of an ecosystem are absolutely present here in India. You've got great startups, you've got great research institutions and universities, you've got money from the government and from the private side coming in. All these different sections. You have organizations that are helping entrepreneurs, like TIE, right? Like Indian Angel Network, some of the chambers of commerce too, like FICCI, PhD. You have all of these organizations there, but they seem to be working in a very fragmented way, and they're not working in a joint way. So the idea behind Nexus was to be a neutral organization to help bring together these pieces and have them start working together. Because when you have them start working together, that's where you really see the ecosystem grow. That's the difference between a Silicon Valley and an Austin, Texas, for example, versus some other cities that are also perfectly great and have some wonderful talent, but aren't really considered world centers. Now, this is a thing that doesn't happen in 2 months or 6 months or even a year, but it does happen over a long period of time. So the overall goal from Nexus was to really be a catalyst, a nexus, a center for a lot of these organizations to help Indian startups in general. And then, of course, the specific ones to show that we can walk the talk. It's not just lectures. This is not academic. Is to run this actual program, to have these cohorts and show qualitatively the difference when you have a very strong incubation program, what that can mean to the startups and the results they can show from that.
Very interesting. So coming to the next part, where for years, for ages now, America has been the dreamland where which has been attracting Indian talent, and in the recent past, Indian ecosystem, startup ecosystem has taken inspiration from what's happening in America. Be the likes of Uber, taking birth in form of Ola in India. So there has been this kind of where America on one hand attracts talents from India, and Indian entrepreneurs have been drawing inspiration from America. Do you see going forward, platform like Nexus Incubator would be able to help in cross pollination between the two ecosystem for the greater good?
That's a great question. That's one of the main goals of what we're trying to do at Nexus. The ideas of bringing those best practices in incubation entrepreneurship and helping the Indian startups. Absolutely, and we've seen the numbers, and I can talk about those numbers if you'd like, about the success of our startups. But at the end of the day, if we can also help them bridge and become successful with Indian companies or become involved in the US entrepreneurship system, that's even better. And that's one of the reasons we want to bring this forth as well. To date, we've had over 70 deals with US companies. And by being able to prepare the startups to understand the mindset of American investors, American companies, it makes it so much easier for those Indian startups to get into the door and create those deals with partners or funds or with organizations that are looking to have new innovations and new startups from around the world, especially in India. So yes, so part of creating this bridge between the Indian ecosystem and the US ecosystem, I think Nexus has played a small but growing role. And like I said, of the 150 graduates from Nexus so far, not only have they raised almost over $20 million in outside of funding, but like I said, we've created deals with US companies, over 70 of them. So we were very proud of that and proud of our startup success of being able to cross that bridge between the Indian entrepreneur ecosystem and the US entrepreneur ecosystem.
You talked about the impact that you have created with the Indian startup or to the Indian startup ecosystem. Let's get into some statistics if you would like to share.
Sure. So it really depends on how you measure success, and honestly, each startup will be in a different stage of development, so they'll measure success differently. However, some of the most common things that we talk about are most startups are looking for funding, and they're trying to get funding to accelerate their business, right, or to grow their business. And that's one of the big things that people look at. We try not to put too much of an emphasis on outside funding. We really want to try to have our startups focus on the fundamentals and grow organically, or what we call bootstrapping for startups. But we understand and we understand those needs for growing with outside capital, and we connect and we help them. We teach them how to pitch and how to work with investors and understanding the points of view from outside investors, whether those are grants or whether those are VCs, venture capital firms, whether they're angel investors. So we do spend a lot of time on that and help them understand that. As a result of that, most of our companies have come and said, look, we have found it so much easier to raise funds now after graduating from Nexus. And just to get into the statistics, so we've graduated, we've been here for 4 years. We've graduated 14 cohorts now. We're about to graduate our 14th cohort next week. Those companies, and we do not fund, by the way, Nexus does not fund startups ourselves. But those companies have gone on to raise over $20 million in outside funding. Considering that our incubator program is relatively short, it's what we almost call a pre-incubation program of 9 weeks. And considering that the startups that we bring in are usually relatively earlier stage, they're past the idea stage, but they're pretty early. I have not seen any other incubator match those numbers at all. So $20 million in outside funding. And those are all from small angel investors all the way to large VCs, international VCs as well. Again, I don't know any other incubator that can claim those kind of numbers.
I must say that's a commendable work. We have not come across any of the incubators which has done that for early stage startup. Very rightly, put across, which is for an early stage startup, which probably have just beyond the idea stage.
Sure.
I would say, kudos to you, to Nexus and the team that's.
Thank you. No, absolutely, we believe that too. And again, there are some of the large incubators that are more on the technical side that have worked when they've gotten large deals. But from the business incubator that is a sector agnostic like we are, I've not seen that. Like I said, deals with American companies, we've gotten over 70 deals with US companies. Again, that's, considering that the amount of difficulty startups to work with larger established companies in the first place, and to do that internationally adds another layer of complexity there. We're very, very proud of that. We've also tracked some of the jobs that those companies have created here in India. And we can give you, there's literally over 2,500 jobs were created from these companies. The statistics of how long they've lived. So, the average startup lasts, I think you've seen the statistics that, 75 to 80% of startups die within the first 2 to 3 years, right? If not higher. So looking at this, and we're saying we have a survival rate of over 75%, again, shows you that the companies that we're working with have been much more successful and much more sustainable over the long term. So these are kind of some of the statistics that we have. We're happy to talk about more of them. But when we look at the startups and say, okay, how can we determine whether we had an effect? How can we determine whether this was relevant and practical and useful? These are some of the statistics we look at. We also, when we're bringing in new startups, when we're recruiting for our next startups, we are totally transparent and open. And so we said, look, before you join us, go talk to any of the companies that have come through, that have graduated from Nexus, and ask them yourself the hard questions of, was this worth our time? Was this interesting? Was this practical, relevant? Did it benefit us? We're totally open in that sense because all of our startups have been extremely satisfied and happy with that. And there are some of our best promoters of saying why Nexus should be an incubator for a startup. So those are some of the things that we work with, that we measure for success rates. And again, so far the numbers have been very, very complimentary, as well as the feedback from our startups. So we're extremely happy at this point to be considered one of the premier business incubators in India.
Well, I must say, Eric, you're making a compelling case, and your stats kind of prove that Nexus is adding the value that it's supposed to, or it intended to. So for the entrepreneurs out there who are in their either ideation stage or have some kind of a prototype or MVP today, for them to be part of Nexus, could you go through the process? How does it happen? Is it once in a year that the cohort starts? What is the process? And what does it take for them to, and where they can find additional information on this?
Absolutely. So we run 3 cohorts a year. We're just finishing up our 3rd cohort right now. Our next cohort will start early next year. So we will open up applications probably within the next 2 to 3 weeks. The application process usually is about a month. We have open up for anybody to submit their applications. Application process is quite simple. It's a couple pages of forms you fill out. But what do we look for? So for companies that are very interested in us and coming to Nexus, what can improve your chances of getting selected for Nexus? Because it is very competitive. Last cohort, we had, I think, 240, 260 applications. And again, we only bring in about 15 companies. So really, the competition is quite tough. What we look for from startups, first of all, you do have to be past the idea stage. So if you have a great idea, that's wonderful, but the most value you're going to get from us is if you already are past that. You have an industrial prototype. Maybe you have a prototype in the field, trying with customers, or software already in the beta prototype. So we want to be a little bit further along than the idea stage. However, on the other side, we want to get you and work with you before you've gotten institutional type of funding. So that means a venture capitalist. If you've received your first round of VC funding of 10 crore or something like that, then you are probably a bit too advanced for what we have in Nexus. So that's kind of the area we fit in. Secondly, we are a business incubator, but we are for innovative startups. So there has to be some kind of innovation. Usually I say the word technology, but I don't want to focus on that too much because it doesn't have to be deep tech, right? It doesn't have to be these, graphene nanotubes or Bluetooth automated in artificial intelligence or deep machine learning. It doesn't have to be deep tech at all, but there's got to be something that's different, something innovative. We don't really work well with Me Too technologies or Me Too ideas. So for an example, you maybe are going to have a startup and you're going to create the new Cafe Coffee Day franchise in your neighborhood because there's nothing there. And that's great. It could be a wonderful business opportunity. Really not for us. Perhaps you are a handicrafts manufacturer and now you're looking to export to the United States, and you're working with these different artisans to bring those. That's great as well, and there'll be a great business model, but it doesn't really fit our model. So it's not saying that the technology is good or bad, or your startup idea is good or bad, but it probably does not work for a Nexus. So you do have to have some kind of innovation there, some kind of idea that's different from somebody else. So those would be 2 ideas that we'd want to make sure that you understand. Right now, our cohorts are virtual. Previously, of course, before COVID, they were physical in New Delhi, but now they're virtual. So we're having people from all over the country. We have about 60% from Delhi and about 40% from all over the country. We are looking to get back to a physical cohort soon, but it really will depend on COVID-19 and how that's going to be working. So the idea is, again, we'll be opening applications soon. You can go to our website at www.startupnexus.in to look. There's a bunch of FAQs and other information on the web page there. We will open the applications probably about 1 or 2 weeks. The next cohort, which will be our 15th cohort, will be starting at the end of January. And again, this is about a 9-week intensive program. So again, welcome anybody who thinks that this might be good for them. And if they have specific questions, either of us or startups that have graduated, they want to learn more about it, we're always open for that.
Now that brings me to the interesting question, which is, I'm sure it will be on top of mind of most of the entrepreneurs who are listening to this interview. Do they have to move lock, stock, barrel to Delhi to be part of this 9 weeks cohort? Is it important that all key managers to attend it, or just one founder or co-founder to attend it? Could you go into details of when you talk about the physical attendance of this, or physical cohorts?
Yes. So leaving aside the virtual cohort, because obviously for virtual, you don't have to be here. For the physical cohort, and we're hoping to move back to that, maybe the next cohort or not, we'll see. But when we do hold the physical cohort, then we do expect the members to be here. The idea is that this is a very intense experience. This is not a once a week, do a lecture kind of thing. So we do expect, whether the founder or whether it's a decision maker, it doesn't have to be specifically the founder, but we don't want a low-level intern or a new fresher coming in and taking the class. We want to make sure that the lessons learned here at Nexus are able to then be implemented in your company. So we want somebody with decision-making process. So we do want somebody that will be here and that can physically come to our programs. We are located right downtown in New Delhi off of Connaught Place on KG Marg. And that is where the classes happen. The idea for those 9 weeks is that of those 9, every week, from 3 to 4 days, you are physically present at Nexus. The last 2 days of every week are one-on-one mentoring every other week. So you do have time, and we do appreciate the fact that you need to run your business at the same time. You can't just take off a full 9 weeks and come here. So we're very sensitive to that. And we much understand that, but we also want to make sure the startups understand that this is a commitment. This is not something you can just do on the side for, like I said, for 2 hours on a Friday, and then you're done with it. The intense learning, the networking, the mentorship, all these things, when we have a physical cohort, are a very strong part of the benefits of that cohort. One of the other things I didn't mention before, Major, and I guess I should, is that this program is supported by the US government, funded by the US government, which we are very grateful for. What does that mean for startups? Not only does that mean a great publicity and a platform to be able to promote their companies and to work with other agencies in the US government or other agencies in the Indian government, but because it's fully funded, there is no fee for this program. So it's actually free. We do not take equity in the startups. We don't charge fees or monthly fees for the startups. So it's absolutely free for the startups to participate in. Now, that doesn't mean that it's cheap, and we do expect people to, take it as seriously as we do. But if that's one of the concerns is, wow, I can't afford a kind of a world-class program like this, you don't have to worry about that because the US government is paying for this 100%.
In near future, is there a possibility of having a Nexus Incubator down south or any other city other than New Delhi?
Sure. Well, that's a very good, interesting question, because there is discussions about that right now. So we are talking with Mumbai, the consulate in Mumbai, to see if we can, in the future, next year, not the January cohort, but maybe in the future, run one of the cohorts in southern India, right? Specifically, perhaps in Mumbai. So those discussions are going on. As you can imagine, there's a lot that goes involved with that, finding the right space, making sure security, all of these different things. So those discussions are going on because there has been an interest of specifically putting a cohort down there. We probably won't find out about that till spring of next year, but that is a discussion that is going on. In the meantime, though, we have been asked, and throughout the 4 years, we've been asked by different organizations and the consulates all across India to do mini programs. So we've done industry workshops, we've done master classes on investment or on pitching or on value proposition, on finances, intellectual property, all across the country. I just finished one virtually, of course, for Kerala. And I did a program also, some lecture programs in Calcutta. So although the main program, yes, we're thinking about doing another one in Mumbai, there are certain parts of the program that we do all the time in different areas. And if universities or organizations or incubators are interested in inviting us in there, we are happy to do that. Again, for us, the whole point is to kind of support the ecosystem throughout India. So if we can do that with a small virtual or even a physical trip, let us know. We're always open to that.
Well, I'm sure, having these small programs across, peppered across India, especially where the US consulates are located, it would
Mhm.
help local ecosystems to a large extent.
Absolutely.
Agree with that. And finally, Eric, My Startup TV, is working with you
Mhm.
with Nexus Incubator. How do you see this relationship going forward? And what are your thoughts about My Startup TV as a media platform?
I've kind of hopefully mentioned and given a good overview of what Nexus is and why we think it's been great and the reaction we've gotten from the ecosystem here in India and how we've grown. One of the things that I think, honestly, we can do a much better job at that we haven't done a great job on the last 4 years is publicity, is getting the story out there. Again, word of mouth, and our startups are some of our greatest supporters and marketing agents for that. And with the official government channels through social media and embassy, that's all great. But there are plenty of people who don't know about Nexus at all. And so we are extremely pleased to be able to work with somebody like My Startup TV to be able to get the message out, especially with somebody like yourself who is specifically tuned in to the audience of startups and the entrepreneurship ecosystem. So for us to be able to partner with you and yourself, a startup, to be able to give you a platform for the US government, and for us to have you as a way to channel to get out to more entrepreneurs to spread the message is extremely important for us. So we think that this is a great potential partnership. We see this growing further with every cohort and every event that we have. And we really hope that this will be one of the main ways that entrepreneurs are tuning in and finding out what's going on in the India ecosystem and what kind of opportunities there are for them, whether it's with somebody like Nexus or whether it's a pitching event or a funding or whatever the type of conference is, however it can be. If Startup TV, My Startup TV is going to be a channel for that, we would only support that.
Thank you, Eric. Really appreciate your support towards My Startup TV, and we look forward to hosting you on some of our other panel discussions and source. Thank you very
Awesome.
much.